movement and dancing in a counterclockwise circle with intention. And that spirit of that can be found in nearly everything we do. The HBCU marching bands, New Orleans Second Line, that same rhythm, it covers the African diaspora and beyond. That Tresillo rhythm, that pop, 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 pop. That's that. I got my stick ready for the ring shout.
Okay now.
That's
Okay.
that pattern.
Mm.
You hear that from New Orleans to Brazil. It's the most popular bell pattern all throughout Africa. And so the resilience of the music, the movement, all of that we've been able to hold on to. And your dance is reflective of that.
Mm. So tell me what's okay, so you're joining us on Sunday,
Yes.
and we're gonna be at Southview Cemetery, Mausiki.
Okay.
Like, I mean, okay, so y'all have to hear this. This Southview Cemetery, Oakland Cemetery has a whole nother rhythm, a whole nother vibe to it, and because of the time frame in which it was founded and it and where it sits inside of the city, it's physically more constrained. It's a little bit of a smaller footprint. The cemetery itself is because of that, the lay of the land and where the graves all are sort of stacked in place with each other are very, very different from Southview. And then the mistreatment of our ancestors in 1866 by the hands of the Atlanta City Council to remove our ancestors and, basically toss them over a hill.
Wow.
And we lost them into a flooded zone for 150 years. Well, it took some time, but Black folks gathered their own resources and established Southview. And so just knowing that history,
Right.
when you drive up on Southview, it's so dope. It is so powerful. The land is expansive. It's 100 acres, just sprawling,
Okay.
it's hilly. You're gonna go up a hill to enter it. When you finally get into the entrance, there's this statue, and it's not an obelisk like the Confederate monument in Oakland. It's an angel.
Ah. Okay.
That's a whole different, sort of statement even within it. That's the central image. And you go around a roundabout and you are passing the likes of Dr. King's mother, and Geneva Hagerbrooks and Alonzo Herndon and all of those like the founders of Atlanta are all in this space. And so, just I'm just thinking about this hallowed ground and sharing this space with you, Mausiki,
Yeah.
as we journey through time and music and remember our ancestors.
Wow, that is powerful. I mean, I think that Baba Asa Hilliard, when reflecting on the Ma'afa, the slave, the impact of slavery on African families in North America, he talks about it being the social damage of our families, and that trauma. I think that to come together in the spirit of the praise house, in the tradition of ring shout, creates, like you said, a hallowed ground for that healing to take place. As we know, before 1910, most of us were living in the South under sharecropping like conditions and debt peonage, and going to the North with the Great Migration and urban centers, because there was so much concern with putting food on the table and finding a place to live and maintaining family, there wasn't just a lot of time to focus on that healing work, like the way this particular project does with intention. So I think it's very timely that we still need that balm. We still need that healing. And in the African tradition, ancestors are also living. So those individuals who went through that trauma need healing as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
And we represent that bridge between the future and those ancestors.
yeah. As a, a manifestation of their prayers, you know.
That's right.
Yeah. And those who are at rest at Southview, man, the story of their lives, their collective lives of you know freedom fighters, and in the ultimate liberation of our people, the narratives that, and upon narratives that are there to uphold, that legacy in this work, and hopefully activate a whole another layer of freedom for that community is what the project hopes to bring. But I wanted to talk to you about the ring shout
Okay.
in particular, and
Yeah.
how it resonates in your work and in your body of work, and in your community, not just in the actual
Okay.
performance element.
Wonderful. So, my main means of kind of gaining a deeper understanding of the ring shout comes from a historian I hold dear to my heart, Baba Sterling Stuckey. In
Mm,
his book Slave Culture, the first chapter is dedicated to this ring shout and this circle of culture. And thinking about my ancestors, my father's people come from Arkansas, my
mm,
mother's family, South Carolina, and thinking about all the Africans taken into those areas, because Arkansas at one point would have been Louisiana, South Carolina. At one point, 1 out of 4 Africans coming into that region were coming through Charleston. So thinking about my family, thinking about my ancestors coming into those spaces, we know that like before 1830, most of those communities of people were identifying based on their African ethnic affiliation. So Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Ewe, Fanti. So as time progressed, that ring shout, a lot that dancing in a counterclockwise circle. Many of us may have seen it on Beloved, where it's like show me your hands. This
mhm,
movement. As early as 1690, the idea of dancing as it related to religious worship was made outlawed for us as a people. 1739, we see the drum becoming outlawed in the British colony of South Carolina. So this ring shout, allowing for us to create this unity, like joining the circle, we begin to forget about those ethnic affiliations, and blackness as well as a shared language became the new unity. And so with my group Common Ground, it literally pulls from that inspiration that this is the common ground between traditional African, the richness of traditional African societies all up and down the west central coast of Africa, as well as its diaspora, right? The diaspora from Brazil to New Orleans, that it really represents one family. So the way that I try to exemplify that in my work is to pull from that experience. I look at Brazil as being the epicenter of the diaspora. So you see, like the vast majority of Africans that were forcibly removed from the continent between the 16th and 19th centuries were taken to Brazil. And you can see it in the richness of the culture, the same way you see it. I mean, because they were there in a majority, we see it in dynamic fashion. We see the same thing in the Caribbean as well as with our experience here. So it's that thread that runs through that experience, that thread that unites our ancestral land, our diaspora. Because if we listen close, it's the same pulse in all of those spaces. It's the same spirit in all of those spaces, and resistance in all of those spaces as well.
mhm, mhm.
So
How,
I try to recognize that in my work, and without compromise. That's my objective, is to exemplify that in my recorded music, in our live performance, and pulling from artists that represent that tenacity, that ashe, that vital spirit. That as I think about my ancestors that left Africa, I know that they were able to continue to go to the proverbs, to the sayings. Those things are very much alive in my family. The storytelling, as to not be consumed by the wider world that impacted us with um, with oppression. That we went there for a lifeline to get some resolve, to get some balance.
And that continues?
Oh, absolutely, it continues. I mean, when I think about it, in ways of James Brown used the phrase escapism, right? So we think about like music of empowerment for Black folks. We tend to think about fight the power and say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. But even the means of finding freedom by going elsewhere. That swing low, sweet chariot coming forward to carry me home in the spirituals. Home, of course, could have been Africa. It could mean heaven after Christian ideas were assumed. And then it could mean any place other than this cotton field, just
Mhm.
anywhere else. The same
Mhm.
thing with Sunrise concept in the 1950s, wanting to take Black people away from oppression with his intergalactic band called an orchestra.
Mhm.
Parliament Funkadelic, same concept with the mothership. Arrested Development, Take Me to Another Place. The
Mhm.
same theme we see. Bob Marley, Exodus, and within the blues tradition, the idea of jumping a train to go elsewhere or to find freedom. The idea is that any place other than here, even if it were temporary, even if it were just temporary relief from oppression, that music allowed for that type of outlet, and it continues to play that role. And it also was done cool. Like if you think about it, if you think about the conditions that our ancestors lived under, and then think about how much creativity emerged from that space, even if we compared it to what was taking place in a plantation owner's home. That there's no music that the world lines up to, that Europeans during those 300 years of slavery plus created, that the world is saying, oh, I want to play that. That when you think about what Black people created between 16th century till now in this part of the world, from the spirituals, work songs, blues, several different types of blues, ragtime, several different types of jazz, techno, house, funk, soul, R&B, the list goes on. And to think under the conditions in which they created that, it's mind-boggling, that level of creativity, the continuity, and like you said, it continues today. The vast majority of people that live in America have German ancestry. People that claim American citizenship, German ancestry. But the vast majority of music being created in these spaces come from this very root that we're talking about. That people are lining up to play that style of music with its roots in Africa and in the African experience of the diaspora.
That for me, it it speaks to resistance. That in the
Absolutely.
moment of resistance, this infinite portal of possibilities is opened. That
Yes.
somehow in our ritual to aspire to achieve freedom, we conjure and open up to another place. Like
For
we
sure.
astro travel, whatever. Um, you know, and so then I think about what are we opening now? You know,
Mm. I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean,
like
Zora Neale Hurston said
so
it's
keep
the
remembering, reflecting back Sankofa, looking back to
yeah.
see forward. This is what our ancestors was doing, you know, and this moment of resistance now, or this this, I think, this opportunity to conjure this new world, create the birth and
Oh,
create.
absolutely. I mean, the oneness is there. I mean, when you listen to John Coltrane's saxophone, when you watch um, us at a bimbe,
Mhm,
possessing Oshun, that we become one with the thing, and that thing is done with a particular style. In in all of those genres mentioned, we speak in the language the way we talk that talk, the way we talk that talk, right? In
mhm,
our own unique way.
mhm,
That there wouldn't be blues had black folks been trying to talk like standard white American so-called proper English. It wouldn't be hip hop. So those things have a certain style. There's an aesthetic of what it means to be cool, to have a
mhm.
cool head. So even in the midst of everything falling apart around you, hey, be cool.
We cool.
Like there's resistance in that,
Yeah,
in us being able to walk through, right? When we walk through,
affirm life.
yeah, affirm life,
Yes.
and to affirm ourselves, and to be able to do that and reclaim all of these different creative works that have come from the pool of black genius.
Mhm, mhm. And that itself is the resistance too for me in terms of reclaiming our narratives, our intellectual property, our footprint on humanity, who all we have been and who we are, so that we can be clear about where we're going and who we're becoming.
That's real.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have some things to share. You've been looking
Oh,
on your
let me see.
screen.
Let me
You got
see if
some
I can
stuff. I
share my
want you to share your
screen. Let me.
stuff. We have a genius in our midst, everybody. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I'm excited too. I it's not giving me permission just yet to share my screen. I think you may have
Okay.
to
All right.
grant me permission.
Oh, grant you permission. Let's see, how do I do that? Share screen. Multiple participants share screen. Yes.
Okay, are we there yet?
I think so. I just
Okay,
said
here, let
something.
me let me
Try it
try.
again.
Let me try it. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, here we are.
We got folks on
Okay.
Instagram too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I put my phone showing the screen.
Can you see my my
My
black
bootleg version
ethos?
of all of this. Oh yes.
Okay, nice. So this comes from that same historian. I don't. I know this is very wordy, but I'll read through it quickly, and we can jump in. This comes from, again, that same historian, Dr. Sterling Stuckey, Baba Sterling Stuckey. A thorough examination of folk songs and tales indicate that enslaved Africans were able to fashion a lifestyle, a set of values, and ethos which prevented them from being imprisoned altogether by the definitions which the larger society sought to impose. This ethos was an amalgam of Africanisms, these are African retentions, and New World elements which helped enslaved Africans, I'm modifying the language, feel their way along the course of American slavery, enabling them to endure. The values expressed in folklore acted as a wellspring to which enslaved Africans trapped in the wasteland of American slavery could return in times of doubt to be refreshed. And I'm sharing this slide because I literally feel like that's what we're doing in times of
Mhm,
doubt, to be refreshed, considering the parameters that we have to move in, that these are acts of self-determination. So to fashion that lifestyle and a set of values, one of those elements, one of those rituals that enabled us to be reaffirmed is this Congo practice of the ring shout, of moving through the Dakanga in reverse order. It literally represents the transmigration of the sun, and the sun rising and setting, and the eternity around that, very much correlating with human life. That the early on, we are dealing with us at birth, which is sunrise, us at our most vital period, and light giving, very life giving energy, which is noonday. Sunset is us in our elder years, and then sun, after the sun has set, that represents the ancestral realm. And so that ring shout comes from the king, comes from this area of West Central Africa, likely emanating from the Kingdom of Congo. Now, of course, our ancestors came everywhere from the Senegambian region to Angola to all of the
Molly.
Guinea coast, right? We came from all of these areas. 90% of us came from that coast, and others from the interior, some from East Africa. But it is believed that the Congo region culturally shaped that particular ritual known as the ring shout. And interestingly, there's this ritual called Sangamentos that was a part of honoring the Mani Congo of the Kingdom of Congo, where there'd be dancing, there'd be a sword on one side, and there's this heavy plumage on in the headdress of the Mani Congo, as well as some of the dancers. And there are scholars that are drawing associations between that particular festival, the Mardi Gras of New Orleans, and the same things that we're seeing, the same practices we're seeing from the Mardi Gras Indians. That plumage, um, and the style of dress and the dancing and this idea of vitality. If you see in the gold writing at the bottom, good warriors were by definition also good dancers, masters of a technique of dodging, spinning, and leaping that was crucial in local warfare. So dancing was key, and that's very unique to African ways of expression, like
Mhm.
playing the piano, your fingers dancing and up and down the keys, playing the guitar, the same thing. Motion
Mhm.
is very central to how we express. And so when we see these worlds colliding between the 16th and the 19th centuries, African ways of movement and improvisation were heavily judged, heavily judged. And to some extent, you see that same thing happening now. This idea of marching through in a very a grid and regimented, that particular theme, that particular structure can't be overlaid on top of African dance, New Orleans second line,
Mhm.
improvisation. When it was first introduced in the way of jazz, you had these individuals writing in high tone journals and reviews. This is not real music. It can't be written down. It's played different every time. All of the It wasn't meeting the criteria of this, this Western aesthetic,
Yeah.
because it doesn't belong in a Western aesthetic. And unfortunately, the overassessment of our expressions created jargon that's still in place today, like blue notes, which is really a ridiculous term, because they didn't recognize those tones, and in that cognitive dissonance, so we have to give them a name.
Mhm.
But they were not blue notes to James Brown and Bessie Smith and even our ancestors that created the spirituals and this early music. They weren't an aberration. They weren't foreign to anybody. When you hear your grandmother moaning in the kitchen and she says, "Mm-hmm," there's some woman moaning in Switzerland, nothing like that, not in that scale, because we brought that scale with us. And
Mhm.
in the absence of having an understanding of it, all of these labels got put on it, and that still shapes, music discourse to this day. When in fact, it's the overassessment of concepts that were not understood, and it's still part of common discourse. So we get into the ring shout. Any we
Well, I wanted to share that while I was in the Gambia, I had a chance to sit in the presence of indigenous ceremony and celebration and witness improvisational movement and the very thing that you're describing about our dexterity inside of that and strength, the Mandinka in particular is where my husband's from. He's his ethnic group,
are nice.
and it is a sign of strength. Your how well you dance. Their music, their hip hop, in it is laid on top of indigenous rhythm, and so their hip hop dance movement still shows warrior, you know, speed in some
Hmm.
cases, depending on the beat, but mostly usually speed, and it is some of the most beautiful things to see, just as you described them. But how that that was uninterrupted for them on the continent, and how that that same element expresses in other ways here present with us, but it all is one.
Oh, absolutely. That's cool to be able to witness that. Yeah, like the dancing and the vitality behind it. And when Baba Sterling Stuckey mentions the spirituals, he also reminds us that there were dances that went along with that. Is always going to be some
Mhm.
dancing, the movement, even as the drum is outlawed. There's quickly replacing it with juba padding, temporarily using drums, beatboxing, that the spirit of that cannot die.
Mm-mm.
And I was able to borrow this from a friend that posted it on Facebook. You're seeing these these Congo celebrations, and I shouldn't call them celebrations, but more so dancing. Even the Congo Square down in New Orleans, where on Sundays you're seeing African dance, and in some of these spaces where this particular these particular expressions are made outlawed. There's something called the Code Noir in 1624. I'm sorry, 1685, and then again in 1724, where drumming is outlawed in French territories. There's the shutting down of Black Mardi Gras, African dancing in the Northeast, places like New Jersey with the Pinkster Festival. So it was considered vulgar. Like, why would you want to dance and move like that? And so as early as 1690, we're seeing those particular dances, the idea of dancing suppressed, and the idea that, okay, shouting is okay. And even the word ring shout, we know that the ring shout is really a dance. And for our ancestors, it was so central to their life that in the next couple of slides, you'll see where you have individuals in a church in Baltimore that are saying that this particular ritual must continue. My good brother, Kenyatta Bush, down in McIntosh County, Georgia,
Mhm.
has shared with me about witnessing the ring shout in that area, which is one of the last strongholds where this is practiced. This is the McIntosh County shouters that you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen. And with deep intention, they are preserving the ring shout. And you see the mothers over here dancing in a counterclockwise circle. You see the same concept over here. And we're seeing that even when the Portuguese arrived in the Congo, some of them thought, well, hey, Christianity has been here already because they had the cross, but their cross represented the land of the living and the land of the ancestors, and the idea of the continuity of life in relationship to the sun. So they had embodied the concept of the cross, the concept of not even the concept, but the cross with its own unique meaning before the Portuguese arrived in like the late 15th century. So that ring shout is a dance, and in that dance, there's the idea that you don't cross your feet in front of one another, because that would be considered dancing. That would be considered taboo. But of course, just as in certain systems like Candomblé, Santeria, Vodun down in Haiti, that the hiding of the traditional African deities in the Catholic saints, many people are saying, well, we don't have to do that anymore. Let's toss the European imagery of the saints and and just say, hey, we are honoring our Orisha, our Bosum, our Loa in in a way that's reflective of traditional Africa, or in a way that's reflective of this being African people's birthright, rather than it having to be tied to syncretism. And so, in that same way, we can bring full on African dance into the ring shout as well. So, the
Mhm.
continuity of this represented our ancestors galvanizing and unifying and becoming, creating a sense of oneness. In fact, Sterling Stuckey says our nationalism, the idea of African people as a nation in North America, grows out of the ring shout.
Mm, mm. I was raised shouting in the Pentecostal church,
All right.
and I didn't. I mean, yeah, I shouted. So I can't say that I knew that it was African.
Mm.
I We spoke in tongues
Hmm.
as a part of our initiation, right?
Right.
And but for me, I always wondered, okay, what tongues? Like tongues is a language. That's a language. So where does this
I
language
mean,
come from?
Zora Neale Hurston and W.B. Du Bois both talk about shouting, the shout being so central to our particular religious experience. And when Baba Miri Baraka in Blues People talks about when we move into some northern spaces, some of us try to leave the shout behind, and as well as when the Fisk Jubilee Choir, of course, and Hampton Institute, they were raising this money for their school. They went and hired these composers to kind of take that grit out of the music, as to to have their donors not be reminded, their white donors not be reminded of the pains of slavery. But yet those songs do preserve many of the spirituals, and so they do have utility. But we also know that our ancestors were not singing in Western opera fashion on a Mississippi plantation.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think there's also a layer of just sort of anti-blackness in pushing a European aesthetic that's not just void of slavery, but just void of indigenous expression that
right.
points us back to Africa, I think,
Mhm.
as well. You know, I feel like the tongues, the Holy Ghost, even the dance of the ring shout, the shouting, that comes from a space of freedom, an indigenous innate space of freedom, pre-colonial, conditions.
Right.
And for me, to remember that is to remember that, to tap into that infinite well of wisdom and love in our ancestral realm, rather than discard it for the
Absolutely.
purposes of assimilation or acceptance.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, I think that that's what ends up happening. That there's this push to become mainstream. I mean, with Melville Herskovitz and E. Franklin Frazier having their debate as to where Africanisms found in the African diaspora, particularly North American Black folks, and E. Franklin Frazier being the African scholar said no, but we now know that he feared that we wouldn't have the rights and privileges of America if it came out culturally that we were holding on to all of this African culture, but the extended family, in the realm of the arts, in our burial practices, the wake, all of these concepts easily traceable to Africa. But and so now we know
And
it's not only, yeah,
and I assert that that is the very thing that is appropriated and valued, and and then is the genius that continues to evolve the world. You know,
absolutely.
yeah. And so, I mean, we know that within ourselves, um, but do we? Do all of us, or do we need to be reminded that? Or you know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that you're right. It is continuously appropriated, and even the language around it, that blues is an American art form, jazz is the people who created those art forms weren't American at the time the art forms were created. Even when they were introduced, they were all rejected. Even hip hop rejected before they were accepted. with the ragtime music and what happened with Scott Joplin, the idea of his music being arranged by these composers when he had arranged all of it himself. But now we're beginning to see that music having commercial viability. In the um, previous hundreds of years before Joplin, we're seeing this music outlawed. We're seeing it ridiculed in terms of men being called, dealt with in the way of minstrelsy, the
Yes.
blues, being called primitive jazz, and all of a sudden it's just overemphasized now that this is American music. It was created by African people, however, living on American soil. And then there's debate even in terms of where do you put the starting blocks, because when the Portuguese were engaged in trade, even before the so-called slave trade started, the Portuguese were trading goods with the Kingdom of Congo. Even before the 16th century, there was a pipe organ in the Congo where Africans were beginning to explore musical concepts on the pipe organ prior to the slave trade. That kind of challenges my thinking in terms of our relationship to those instruments. And let it be known that I am saying that when we express ourselves, even on instruments created in Europe, we were expressing Africa through those instruments and redefining the very tones of those instruments, like the harmonica and the saxophone. So we're putting our own soul through that. And being that we're in captivity, I think that it's important to note that, we, with the praise house, with the ring shout, with the different expressions of music that grow out of those spaces, that we are here now, Charmaine, in a way where we could redeem
Hmm.
um, those spaces and give agency to our ancestors' voices, who in those times didn't really have maybe the platforms that we have, or didn't have a voice to say, this is my creation, these are my works. Help, I'm going to do it in my context. I'm going to perform it in my context, as well as gain the financial benefits from it once
Hmm.
if it becomes a commercial product.
And I'm looking at it as in a retrospective way, unifying and reclaiming what has happened in the past. But I also feel like it is a unifying element for since it till now, that we can see that those traits, those cultural, you know, elements of our identity sustained, and they persevered, and they continue to express today, and that is what has continued to propel our genius. It really has. And that, for me, is how I even enter into this project at Southview, because I can look at how history has unfolded for our people between, our earliest burial grounds at Oakland Cemetery, or in the
Mhm.
mistreatment of our people, all the way to how we're burying and reverencing our ancestors still now, still today, and encompassing all of that history inside of just this literal map through time of our genius.
Mhm.
And how those prayers of our ancestors, you know from the entry point of this country, even from being taken from before to, our existence before colonization, how those prayers are what has transferred from generation to generation to generation, and expressed in the lives of those who are buried at Southview Cemetery, where they could be the freedom fighters and the architects
Mm.
of modern day Atlanta, of modern day North America. I mean, really,
Right.
as
Yeah.
these are the first founders of all kinds
Mhm.
right after Reconstruction institutions,
Right.
and that same ashe, or that same, power and identity that preserved us and propelled us forward and asserted life and affirmed life during the ring shout is what keeps us still now. So you see it in our cultural identity and continued expression still today. So why not, with that, harness that and
Right.
be and with with direct intention affect change, you know, and push
Yeah.
and push forward with freedom.
I
Still
mean, and
with
the beauty is that
being
as we
inspired. Yeah,
yeah, and we
inspired.
recycle this even when you think about the songs of the civil rights movement, Black Power era, that those freedom songs were creative renditions of spirituals,
Yes.
and ring shout is found in our parade tradition, and
Yeah.
so it keeps showing up, right?
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
continue to be who we are, and even with what you're saying in terms of the burial, sacred burial grounds, that we had those rituals called sitting up, where you sit up with the family and you
Mhm.
bring food.
Mhm. Mhm.
We brought the wake, which is practiced among all people now. That idea of the wake or second wake, that yes.
Remembering the stories of
Mhm.
them. Yeah.
And even the Memorial Day, the earliest
Yeah.
Memorial Day, that's our creation as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
I think that as we approach these spaces with intention,
Yeah.
it's just plenty of healing work to be done.
Plenty of healing work, and I'm excited to host you in at the Praise House installation this weekend.
All right.
At Southview Cemetery, I'm excited for all of Atlanta to come through and see this beautiful community, a community in transition, in growth, and reclaiming. And in honor of these ancestors that lay rest there, and it's really also cool to be in a community where everywhere you go, everyone says, "Oh, my family's there. Oh, my
Mm.
family's there." That was different than Oakland Cemetery.
Oh
There's
wow.
only a few
Okay.
folks that you would run into that said my folks were there. But the whole neighborhood, like for generations, have been laid to rest there, and the families remain. The churches are still connected to that space, and the community is still connected. So I look forward to inviting and hosting everyone there on Sunday. The Praise House is actually going to be constructed in next year, Juneteenth, but we have this amazing production that we're doing as a site specific installation and projection installation. I want everybody to come. It starts from 2 to 5. My host at Southview Cemetery is Winnie Hemphill, who's the executive director. She is the descendant of one of the founders. So she's a treasure as well. And the City of Atlanta Office of Cultural Affairs has granted us a Invest Atlanta grant. So we are making this day really special for everyone. And they are part of a list of sponsors that are making it possible. And Mausiki, you're going to be joined by DJ Cozy Sean,
All right.
Atlanta's DJ historian. That's how I like to think of him. And India Childs has choreographed a high energy contemporary rendition of the Ring Shout. So
Nice.
you're going to get to see that. And we're going to have lawn chairs out there for everybody. And folks can walk the cemetery and do the guided tour on that Sunday. And I just got to make this a series, Mausiki. I don't know.
No,
We just have
we
to.
have to, and we got a ring shout too. So
Okay.
I have a ring shout song that I'm gonna sing, and
Awesome.
we'll make you the person that starts the ring,
You know what?
starts
I'm always the person that
the
starts.
circle.
I'm good with that. I will be out in rare form, everyone. And I'm excited to greet the whole group, Common Ground Collective.
Yes, yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Musiki, you've been such a dope, leader in music spaces to continue to employ and uplift the work of Atlanta's musicians and artists. Thank you for your work that you do.
Thank you, and thank you for your work and for all that you do, your art, and I think that the thing that I'm really appreciating about this project, particularly with the Praise House, is I don't feel like that Praise House gets a lot of attention. You know, it's when you go in some of these spaces where history is discussed, those praise houses are often recreated, very small. But you know, when Nat Turner organized in 1830, those praise houses began to be monitored because that's we were organizing in
Places of
those spaces
resistance.
in the hush harbors, you know,
Yes,
organizing resistance movements.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's true. It's true. All right, so we're gonna be organizing on Sunday some resistance movement and liberation movement
Oop.
with Mausiki Scales and Common Ground and all of those who are coming together to give and give honor and reverence and pause in memory of those who come before. And stay connected to the project. Follow praisehouseproject.org.
Mhm.
But also our hashtags Praise House Project and Southbeat Praise House. So we love you. Thank you so much, Musiki.
Much love, Charmaine.
Yes,
Thank
I'll
you.
see you on Sunday.
All
Come
right.
Sunday,
Sunday
y'all. Come
it is. Come
Sunday.
Sunday. Easy
All right.
like Sunday
Yes,
evening.
yes, yes. All right. Have a good one.
And you
Thank
too.